G'day, how's it going? Happy Saturday. How are you, Hayden? Pretty good, pretty good. You guys let me know when you're all set. Excellent. We're coming to you today from Auchenflower, which of course was one of the Brisbane suburbs again affected by the recent flooding, and we're here today to announce our third package of post-disaster assistance grants. The Premier has written to the Prime Minister requesting the Australian Government's agreement to a $771 million package under the National Disaster Recovery Arrangements. This third package has three key elements. The first is what we think will be one of the biggest residential resilience recovery projects ever, certainly in Australia and possibly even the world. We want to give residents the option of retrofitting, raising or selling back their homes. And so under this funding package, we will provide grants of up to $50,000 to retrofit 5,500 homes at a total cost of up to $275 million. We'll have grants of up to $100,000 available to raise homes, to raise up to 1,000 homes. We expect at a cost of up to $100 million, and in addition a $350 million residential buyback program for up to 500 homes where they don't want to flood again, they don't want to retrofit or raise, or for whatever reason they aren't suitable options. As you're aware, we've assessed 6,800 homes as having some kind of damage, and so these funding programs will allow us to now work with councils, insurers and property owners to identify the best option for their property. So as I say, we think this is a world-leading initiative to ensure that we aren't just building back, that we don't put residents back into homes that will flood again. It builds on smaller programs that we've had in conjunction with local governments after previous disasters, including here in the Brisbane City Council local government area. So it'll be administered by the Public Works Department, working with local councils depending on their capabilities, retrofitting, raising or buying back. Once we have confirmation of support for this program from the Commonwealth, further work will be done to develop the guidelines and application process, and so we just ask people to bear with us as we work through those details. Second part of the package that we're announcing today is an increase in the structural assistance grants. These are the upfront grants to get people back into their homes, to make them safe and livable. They have been set at $14,684 for some time. Since then, building and repair costs have gone up quite dramatically, and so we're proposing today to increase the structural assistance grants from that less than $15,000 amount up to $50,000, a very significant increase in those grants. That is anticipated to cost up to $38 million. We're also announcing today a new $30 million package to support local governments and assist them with the clean-up costs that they have been dealing with. Embedded in this program is funding for communications and information, as well as a new flood information portal that will assist residents, insurers, purchasers to see exactly what the flooding risks are in different properties, different parts of the city. So as I say, the Premier has written to the Prime Minister asking for their agreement to jointly fund this new package. We certainly hope that that agreement will come quickly so that we can provide details out to residents very quickly. At the same time, the Premier has also asked the Prime Minister to match the hardship assistance payments that are now provided in all New South Wales local government areas but are not currently available in Queensland. That's thousands thousands of dollars more available to New South Wales residents than Queensland residents. There is no argument or justification for the differential application of those hardship payments, and so we would urge the Prime Minister to also ensure that Queensland flood victims get the same support as New South Wales flood victims. I'm joined by our State Disaster Recovery Coordinator, Major General Elwood. We have Stephen from Suncorp and Andrew, one of the local residents, able to talk to you as well.
Thank you, Deputy Premier. It's Steve Johnston, Chief Executive of Suncorp. Before I get to today's announcement, just a few updates on where the event is tracking from a claims perspective. As I left this morning, we'd had 38,000 claims for this event. We expect to see 45,000 claims or above. This is a huge event. It's the biggest event that Suncorp has ever faced in its history. And to give you some sense of the scale of the event, it's bigger than the combined Queensland 2011 floods, Cyclone Yasi, the Townsville floods and Cyclone Debbie put together. It's a huge event that really spans everything from north of Gympie all the way through down into the southern areas of Sydney. So we have mobilised all of our teams. Today I'm also announcing that we'll be recruiting 600, there'll be 600 new jobs that will be created within our company to help us get on top of this event as quickly as we can. So the scale of it is something that we haven't seen before, and we're mobilising our assessing teams, our claims teams, all of our building repair panel to get on with the job. Here in Auchenflower, one of the areas that's been very heavily hit by this event, we've got a lot of claims and a lot of customers in this area that we'll be working very closely with over the coming weeks and months to get them back in their homes and get them re-established as they need to be. In terms of today's announcement, this is a game changer. I truly welcome it. It's been something we've been talking about and that we've been banging on about for 2 or 3 years. Too often we are the people that go into homes, we look at the people that have been psychologically impacted by all of these events, and this is a very big, very welcome and very supportive initiative, and we'd expect all levels of government to get behind it. We've been talking about a 4-point plan, building better public infrastructure, better private resilience infrastructure, building back better, and making changes to planning laws to make sure that these things don't happen again. What's happened in the past has happened, and we've got to draw a line under that, and we've got to move forward. So it's a very welcome package. We look forward to other levels of government supporting it, and as an insurer and the insurance industry more broadly, we will get behind it and support it as best we can. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Deputy Premier. Look, I've travelled to a number of areas over the last week and a half. I've been to areas hard hit in the Brisbane area, Gympie, Lockyer Valley, Ipswich, Gold Coast, Moreton Bay and the scenic Rim. Today I'll be off to Toowoomba, and tomorrow I'll be off to North and South Burnett. It's been, for me, really important to get out and about. My intention is that by the end of next week I'll have been to all of the hardest hit areas, and I obviously am taking a lot of time to speak to people who have been affected, and obviously also to those who have supported those who have been affected. So over the last week and a half there's been amazing efforts in terms of waste management in all the areas, and many would have seen the armies of cleaning from both the just local community members and the ADF and council workers out there clearing the streets. And in Brisbane City Council alone, they've cleared over 50,000 cubic metres of waste. So it's an unbelievable quantity, but they've done it. And that will be an ongoing thing. Obviously, we'll be looking at areas that are non-residential next. That will be the next focus in terms of waste management. But I must tell one very quick story. I was out visiting the Moreton Bay area, and there was an 87-year-old lady, and anyhow, out the front of her house I saw the neatest packed skip I have ever seen, and I've seen a lot of skips, and she had personally emptied the contents for her neighbour and placed everything in the skip. An amazing effort. Just shows how resilient Queenslanders are. The next focus is obviously accommodation. So a lot of people went into emergency accommodation that won't survive time, and so we're looking at the temporary accommodation that will get them through that gap as they deal with their longer term housing issues. And building materials and trade, obviously, we've heard about that, and we're very much focused on those issues. I guess the common threads that I've seen in my travels is the significant emotional and financial hardship that is experienced by these flood victims. And the other thing that has really struck me is that I would say that well and truly the bulk of the people I've spoken to, this was not the first flood they have faced. So they have faced 2, 3, sometimes 4 floods. And so it really, I think, does emphasise the need for us to look at resilience, both from an infrastructure but from a people perspective. But I would like to finish by saying how impressed I have been with the community, with those affected. I mean, they're so stoic, so strong, and with the local leadership, community leadership at all levels, and the Queensland Reconstruction Authority doing amazing work, and indeed the Australian Defence Force. So very, very impressive, awe-inspiring. Thank you.
We're happy to take questions on this.
We know the Premier's written to the Prime Minister. Can you just detail how that would work? So if he doesn't agree for whatever reason, does that mean this package is off, or can you just provide some more detail on that?
So there are well-established arrangements here for cost sharing post disasters under the National Disaster Recovery arrangements. I certainly hope that the Prime Minister agrees to this package, but obviously that's up to him. We have our funding approved and available now, and we'd look to the Commonwealth to come forward with their funds.
If the Prime Minister doesn't come forward and doesn't agree, will you still be going ahead with your 50%?
We'll have to consider that if that's what the outcome is, but I'd be surprised if that's the case. I think the Australian government know what's happened here. They know how many times it's happened, and I can't imagine the Prime Minister would want to say to flood victims that they have to move back into a home that will flood again, that we know will flood again. And so I expect that they'll support this package because it's a very good package.
And how will you decide which houses are the ones that are retrofitted or buyback? How will that process work?
Yeah, so there's still work to be done on the guidelines to determine all of that, but what we want to do ultimately is work with homeowners to determine the best option for them. I know there's been a lot of talk about buyback, but most people don't want to move from their homes. They just don't want their homes to flood. And so we would expect that most people will take up those other options, those flood-proofing resilience options, but this is the biggest potential buyback, the biggest buyback fund we've ever had available to us. We anticipate that will allow us to buy back 500 properties if people want to. As I say, judging from previous programs, most people won't want to, but some will, and it's great to have that option there.
Deputy Premier, your government only a week ago was essentially saying to the federal government, we don't need your help in terms of the National Emergency Declaration. In hindsight, now that we're asking them for money, is that an arrogant decision?
The offer of that declaration came well after the emergency. These arrangements, these cost-sharing arrangements are well established. They've been in place for a very long time, and they are there so that the states and the Commonwealth can work together after disasters to get people back into their homes and back on their feet. There was never any suggestion that we didn't want assistance. It was just that the suggestion that the Prime Minister wanted to declare an emergency because he was visiting 2 weeks after the disaster wasn't particularly helpful. Supporting this fund would be very helpful.
Why turn down any help even if after the fact?
Oh, well, it wasn't a matter that it was turned down. The Premier indicated that it wasn't required, but it was still it was still the Prime Minister's prerogative to go ahead with it. He could have gone ahead with it. I understand he opted not to, and that was a decision for him.
Can you just clarify, because the Transport Minister's been tweeting relentlessly all week saying that Scott Morrison's incompetent because he didn't declare Queensland as part of that National Emergency Declaration. So did the Queensland
Minister,
or didn't they? Because we've heard it both ways.
Minister Bailey was referring there to those hardship payments where the Australian government is currently providing thousands of dollars more to flood victims in New South Wales than in Queensland. Initially, they were only providing those in Lismore, and then because of the amount of pressure they had on them to extend it to the the other local government areas in New South Wales. They extended it to all of New South Wales. That's just not fair, and Queensland flood victims should receive the same amount.
You cited 6,800 damaged homes. We heard from Steve that they're expecting about 45,000 claims. Is there a chance that people will still miss out under this program? This program is based on the damage assessments that we have done and the estimates that we have of who might need that support. Obviously, it's over and above and separate to people's insurance, and Suncorp is doing a great job. The Suncorp staff are doing a great job, as are the other insurers, of working with property holders. But this will give other options. It will allow, for example, us to work with property holders and insurers to pool resources. It will also allow us to provide assistance to those who don't have insurance, and many people in flood areas just weren't able to afford that flood insurance, particularly where they'd flooded previously.
But what if you are inundated with applications and then you have to make a decision between who gets what and who misses out?
Yeah, look, as I say, we'll need to work through the guidelines and more detail will be provided at that stage. If they're oversubscribed, then we'll take that into account as well. This is not the final package. This is the third package, but there will be more, and we're working on more. So, look, this is the biggest package of its kind. It's the first time we've sought to do it at this scale. I understand the program we partnered with Brisbane City Council on. I think in the end they saw about 50 properties bought back. So this is much more substantial than that. We think it will broadly match demand, but obviously we'll need to get those guidelines and get the application process open so we can start to see.
On those $3,000 payments, do you know who decides who gets what on those $3,000 payments in New South Wales compared to Queensland?
So they're Australian government payments. They're a determination made by the Australian government on a local government area by local government area basis. And for whatever reason, they've determined to provide a larger amount in New South Wales than in Queensland. There's no justification has been given for that, and we'd certainly hope to see Queenslanders get treated the same as New South Wales flood victims.
The Prime Minister's office is saying it's the decision of the National Resilience and Recovery Agency, and they've assessed those local government areas based on a government area by government area basis. So is it up to the Prime Minister, or are you barking up the wrong tree?
Well, the Prime Minister certainly made it look like it was up to him when he went there to announce it. So, look, it's his agency, and I certainly haven't been provided with any explanation why New South Wales local government areas should get more in hardship payment than those in Queensland. We know the southeast, more people were affected than in New South Wales. The event went for longer here than in northern New South Wales. There are many Queenslanders still struggling to get back up on their feet, to get into more sustainable accommodation, and these hardship payments should be extended to them. We've requested that. Obviously that's small though in comparison to this much bigger package, this $750 million package that we're announcing today, much more focused on ensuring people don't have to move back into homes that might flood again.
How do you feel about suggestions that we're hearing from northern New South Wales that the ADF have been abused in this matter?
Look, I've only heard those reports second or third hand, but that's distressing to me. I've seen firsthand how hard the ADF are working here in Queensland, cleaning up streets, filling up skips, emptying homes, ripping up carpet, getting homes ready for people to be able to stay in them. The Major General and his team are doing a fantastic job serving Queensland and supporting our recovery efforts, and certainly everywhere I've been, residents have been very grateful for that support. I can't speak for New South Wales. Yeah.
Sorry, can I ask just one more?
You can ask as many as you like.
In a flooded home, your home's flooded, 2011 and just recently. How, and you're hearing this announcement today, how do they get involved? How do they put their hand up to raise their home trust?
Yeah, so the guidelines need to be finalised. We need confirmation from the Australian government that we can go ahead, but then we will have a website available that people can go to, see those guidelines, make an application. We'll try to make it as simple and straightforward as we possibly can. I might see if Brenna from the QRA wants to add anything on that process side.
you.
Brendan Moon, Chief Executive Officer of the Queensland Reconstruction Authority. In relation to this exceptional circumstances package, after the state and Commonwealth agree, ourselves, the Commonwealth and also industry, which will include insurance companies, local councils, building groups, will sit down and determine what those guidelines look like. Now, this has been done before. We've run a cyclone resilience housing program historically. Also, the Brisbane City Council ran a household resilience program as well. And they will determine what those guidelines are in terms of eligibility and the amount of support available. But we have a very good understanding of where the key impacts are, not only from this event, but from the other events that have occurred in the last decade in this particular area. Thank you.
Thanks, DP. Should there be more transparency around how unions deal with labour ministers?
Well, I think there's already a significant amount of transparency there. Where ministers are members of unions, we declare that. I certainly declare that I'm a member of 2 trade unions.
It's on the reef. It's going through its 4th bleaching event in 6 years. It's experiencing severe bleaching. Was it a mistake that it wasn't listed as in danger?
I don't think so. I think, and I say this as former Environment Minister, the first ever Minister for the Great Barrier Reef, I'm very proud of our efforts to protect the reef since coming to government in 2015. And much of that would not have been possible, I don't think, if it had been removed from the World Heritage Register. I think with that global recognition of it as a World Heritage Site, we've been able to justify more investment. We've been able to get more global attention, and ultimately that's been in the best interests of the reef. The ocean is warming, it's getting more acidic, all because of additional carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but the initiatives we've put in place to relieve the other pressures from, for example, runoff, crowns of thorns starfish, those kinds of things, they've given the reef the best chance it has of being resilient in the face of that warmer ocean temperature. The heat wave in the north of the state obviously has affected big swathes of the reef, and so we're very closely monitoring that bleaching event. The World Heritage Committee has a delegation here over the next couple of weeks, and they'll be looking very closely at our efforts, and I certainly hope that they leave the reef on the World Heritage Register, because it remains a thing of global significance, and I think the World Heritage Committee should retain that listing.
How's the state helping to reduce emissions? That's what scientists say is the only way forward. So how is the state helping to reduce that?
So we are pursuing converting our electricity supply to 50% renewable energy by 2030. When we came to office, there were no large-scale renewable energy projects. Now they are all over the state. Wind and solar, and soon storage. Just last week, we released our zero emissions vehicles strategy about converting the state's vehicle fleet to electric vehicles. Again, that will greatly relieve the emissions from our vehicle fleet. Of course, we are also pursuing a hydrogen industry here that will give us an alternative option for particularly things like heavy freight cargo, that kind of thing. So, look.
What the hell is this going to do us being flooded?
Well, that's. I'm just answering the questions I was asked.
Just answering the questions we've asked. We get flooded and you worry about the reef.
Just one last thing. At Ipswich today, there was a protest. Have you signed off on a new rate?
No, they've just completed the public consultation on that proposal. I haven't seen the outcome of that consultation yet, and obviously once I do, I'll be able to take that into account.
He's just talking.
Thank you.
So when is all this large mess